There, off to the left, that large island.
What island is it?
Ship Trap Island. Sailors dread the place. Some superstition, rather a mystery.
Can't see it.
I've seen you take a moose at 400 yards, yet even you can't see 4 miles through a moonless Caribbean night.
Nor 4 yards. It's like boys' black velvet.
Light enough in Rio, make it in a few days. We should have some good hunting up the Amazon.
Ours is the best sport in the world.
For the hunter, not for the jaguar.
Don't talk rot, Whitney. You're a big game hunter, not a philosopher. No one cares how a jaguar feels.
They understand the fear of pain and the fear of death.
Nonsense. This hot weather is making you soft, Whitney. The world is made up of 2 classes, the hunters and the hunted. Luckily, we're hunters. Have you passed Ship Trap Island yet?
Can't tell. I hope so.
Why?
The place has a bad reputation.
Cannibals?
Not even cannibals would live in such a godforsaken place. You notice the crew seemed a bit jumpy today.
Strange. Even Captain Nielsen.
Yes, even that old Swede, who'd go up to the devil himself and ask him for a light. This place has an evil name among seafaring men, sir, he says. Now, you mustn't laugh when I tell you this. I did feel something of a sudden chill. No breeze, sea flat as a plate glass window. A sort of sudden dread.
Pure imagination. One superstitious sailor taints the whole company with his fear.
Maybe. Sailors seem to have an extra sense for danger. Sometimes, evil seems a tangible thing, with wavelengths, like sound and light. Anyhow, I'm glad to get out of this zone. Well, I'll turn in now, Rainsford. You?
I'll have another pipe on the afterdeck.
See you at breakfast then. Good night, Rainsford.
No sound in the night but the muffled throb of the engine moving the yacht swiftly through the darkness, and the ripple of the wash of the propeller.
So dark I could sleep with my eyes open.
Rainsford puffed on his favorite briar pipe, the drowsiness of the night upon him.
An abrupt sound startled him. Off to the right. His ears, expert in such matters, could not be mistaken. Again, the sound, and again. Off in the blackness, a gun fired 3 times.
Rainsford sprang up and moved quickly to the rail. He strained his eyes through a black blanket of night.
Then leapt upon the rail, balancing at a greater elevation. His pipe, striking a rope, was knocked from his mouth. He lunged.
And reached too far.
The blood-warm waters of the Caribbean Sea closed over his head. He struggled to the surface, cried out, but the wash from the speeding yacht slapped him in the face, strangling him with salt water.
Desperately, he struck out with strong strokes after the yacht, but stopped before he had swum 50 feet. A certain cool-headedness had come to him, not his first time in a tight place. There was a slender chance his cries could be heard by someone aboard the yacht, but the yacht raced on.
He wrestled himself out of his clothes and shouted with all his power. The lights of the yacht grew faint, and then they were blotted out entirely by the night.
Doggedly, he swam toward them, swimming with slow, deliberate strokes to conserve his strength.
For an endless time he fought the sea, counting his strokes.
Then, Rainsford heard a sound.
Out of the darkness,
A high screaming sound.
The sound of an animal in the extremity of anguish and terror.
with fresh vitality, he swam toward the sound, heard it again. Then it was cut short by a crisp, staccato sound.
Rainsford swam on.
After 10 minutes of determined effort, he heard the sea breaking on a rocky shore. He was on the rocks almost before he saw them. With his remaining strength, he dragged himself from the swirling waters.
Jagged crags appeared to jut up into the opaqueness. He forced himself upward, hand over hand. Gasping, his hands raw, he reached the top. Dense jungle ran down to the very edge of the cliffs. What peril that tangle of trees held for him was not his concern then.
All he knew is that he was safe from his enemy, the sea.
With utter weariness, he flung himself down at the jungle edge and tumbled headlong into the deepest sleep of his life.
When he opened his eyes, it was late in the afternoon. Sleep had given him a new vigor and a sharp hunger.
Where there are pistol shots, there are men. Where there are men, there is food.
Snarled, ragged jungle fringed the shore.
No sign of a trail. Be sure to follow the shore.
Rainsford floundered along by the water, but soon stopped. Some wounded thing, a large animal, had thrashed about in the underbrush. The jungle weeds were crushed down and the monsters lacerated. One patch of weeds was stained crimson.
A small, glittering object not far away caught Rainsford's eye.
22 cartridge. Odd. Fairly large animal. Thought Hunter had nerve to tackle it with a light gun. Brute put up a fight. First 3 shots I heard, the hunter flushed his quarry and wounded it. Trailed it here and finished it. That was the last shot I heard.
Examining the ground closely, he found the print of hunting boots in the direction he had been going. So he hurried along, slipping on a rotten log or a loose stone, but making headway.
Night, settling quickly.
Darkness blacked out the sea and jungle when Rainsford sighted the lights. As he forged along, he saw to his great astonishment that the lights were in one enormous building, a lofty structure with towers that pointed into the gloom.
His eyes made out the shadowy figure of a palatial chateau set on a high bluff. On 3 sides of it, cliffs dived down into the sea.
Mirage.
He opened the tall, spiked iron gate.
Real enough.
The knocker creaked stiffly, as if it had never before been used. He let it fall, and it startled him with its booming loudness.
Again, Rainsford lifted the heavy knocker and let it fall. The door opened, and Rainsford stood blinking.
The first things Rainsford's eyes discerned was the largest man he'd ever seen, a gigantic creature, black-bearded to the waist. He pointed a long-barreled revolver straight at Rainsford's heart.
Don't be alarmed, I'm no robber. I fell off a yacht. My name is Sanger Rainsford of New York City.
2 small, menacing eyes regarded him. He gave no sign that he understood.
My name is Sanger Rainsford of New York. I fell off a yacht. I'm hungry.
The man's only answer was to cock the hammer of the revolver. Then Rainsford saw the man's free hand go to his forehead in a military salute, click his heels together, and stand at attention.
Another man was seen coming down the broad marble steps, a slender man in evening clothes. He advanced to Rainsford and held out his hand.
In a cultivated voice, marked by a slight accent, with precision and deliberateness.
It is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Sanger Rainsford, the celebrated hunter, to my home.
Rainsford shook the man's hand.
You see, I've read your book on hunting snow leopards in Tibet. I am General Zara.
Rainsford found the man singularly handsome, but with an almost bizarre quality in the general's face. Tall, past middle age.
Thick eyebrows and pointed military mustache.
As black as the night from which Rainsford had come.
Eyes bright, high cheekbones, a sharp-cut nose.
A spare, dark face. The face of a man used to giving orders.
The face of an aristocrat.
The general made a sign. The giant saluted and withdrew.
Ivan, an incredibly strong fellow, but the misfortune to be deaf and dumb. Simple fellow, bit of a savage.
Russian.
Cossack, so am I.
The general smiled.
We shouldn't be chatting here. We can talk later. You want clothes, food, rest?
Ivan reappeared.
Follow Ivan, if you please, Mr. Rainsford. I was about to have my dinner. I'll wait. You'll find that my clothes will fit you, I think.
To a huge, beam-ceiling bedroom, this canopied bed big enough for 6 men, Rainsford followed the silent giant. Ivan laid out an evening suit. Rainsford noticed that it came from a London tailor.
The dining room was remarkable. A medieval magnificence suggested a baronial hall of feudal times, with its oaken panels, high ceilings, and vast tables.
Mounted heads of lions, tigers, elephants, moose, bears. More perfect specimens Rainsford had never seen.
The general sat alone, and the table appointments were of the finest. Linen, crystal, silver, china.
We do our best to preserve the amenities of civilization here. Please forgive any lapses. Do you think the champagne has suffered from its long ocean trip?
Not in the least.
He found the general a most thoughtful and affable host. But one small trait of the general's made Rainsford uncomfortable. Whenever he looked up from his plate, he found the general studying him. appraising him narrowly.
Perhaps you are surprised I recognize your name. You see, I read all books on hunting, published in English, French, and Russian. I have but one passion in my life, Mr. Rainsford, and it is the hunt.
You have some wonderful heads here. That Cape Buffalo is the largest I ever saw.
Oh, that fellow? Yes, he was a monster. Hurled me against a tree, fractured my skull, but I got the brute.
I've always thought the Cape Buffalo the most dangerous of all big game.
The Cape Buffalo is not the most dangerous game. Here, in my preserve on this island, I hunt more dangerous game.
Big game? On this island?
The biggest.
Real?
Oh, not found naturally, of course. I have to stalk the island.
What have you imported, General? Tigers?
No thrill left in tigers. No real danger. And I live for danger, Mr. Rainsford. We'll have capital hunting, you and I.
But what animal, General Zarf?
I think I may say, in all modesty, that I have done a rare thing. Invented a new sensation. Another glass of port?
Thank you, General.
The general filled both glasses.
God makes some men poets, some kings, some beggars. He made me a hunter. Hand was made for the trigger, my father said. At 5, he gave me a little gun, specially made in Moscow to shoot sparrows. I shot his prize turkeys, but he complimented me on my marksmanship. I killed my first bear in the Caucasians at 10. My whole life has been one prolonged hunt. After the debacle in our Russia, I left the country, naturally continuing to hunt. Grizzlies in Iraqis, crocodiles in the Ganges, rhinoceroses in East Africa. It was Africa where the Cape Buffalo hit me and laid me up for 6 months. As soon as I recovered, I headed to the Amazon to hunt jaguars. Unusually cunning, I was told. They weren't. No match for a hunter with his wits about him and a high-powered rifle. I was bitterly disappointed, and a terrible thought pushed its way into my mind. Hunting was beginning to bore me. I had no wish to go to pieces. Mine is an analytical mind, Mr. Rainsford. Doubtless that is why I enjoy the problems of the chase.
No doubt, General Zarf.
Perhaps you can guess why the hunt no longer fascinated me?
What was it?
Simply this. It had ceased to be a sporting proposition. Too easy. No greater bore than perfection. No animal had a chance, not a boast, a mathematical certainty. Just legs, an instinct, no match for reason. This thought was a tragic moment for me. An inspiration came to me.
And that was?
I had to invent a new animal to hunt.
You're joking.
I never joke about hunting. I needed a new animal. I found one, bought this island, built this house, and here I hunt. The island is perfect. Jungles with a maze of traits in them. Hills, swamps.
But the animal, General Zarf.
What are the attributes of an ideal quarry? Courage, cunning, and above all, the ability to reason.
But no animal can reason.
My dear fellow, there is one.
I can't believe you're serious, General Zarf. This is a grisly joke. General Zarf, what you speak of is murder.
The general laughed and regarded Rainsford quizzically.
I refuse to believe that so modern and civilized a young man harbors romantic ideals about the value of human life. Surely your experiences in the war...
Did not make me condone cold-blooded murder.
One does not expect nowadays to find a young man of the educated class, even in America, with such naive and, if I may say so, mid-Victorian point of view. but I'll wager you forget your notions when you hunt with me. You've a genuine new thrill in store for you, Mr. Rainsford.
Thank you. I'm a hunter, not a murderer.
Dear me, life is for the strong, and, if need be, taken by the strong. The weak were put here to give the strong pleasure. Why should I not use my gift? I hunt the scum of the earth, sailors from tramp ships, mongrels. A thoroughbred horse is worth more than a score of them.
But they are men!
Precisely. They can reason, so they are dangerous. It is my pleasure to use them.
Where do you get them?
This island is called Ship Trap. Sometimes an angry god of the high seas sends them to me. Sometimes, when Providence is not so kind, I help Providence a bit.
Zoroff went to the window and looked out toward the sea.
Look, out there!
As the general pressed a button, far out to sea, Rainsford saw the flash of lights.
They indicate a channel where there's none. Giant rocks with razor edges crouch like a sea monster with wide open jaws. Yes, I have electricity. We try to be civilized here.
Civilized? And you shoot down men?
What a righteous young man you are. I treat these visitors with every consideration. Plenty of good food and exercise. You shall see for yourself tomorrow.
What do you mean?
We'll visit my training school. I have about a dozen pupils down there from the Spanish bark San Lucar. Bad luck on the rocks. It's a game, you see. I supply him with food and an excellent hunting knife. 3 hours head start. I follow, armed only with a small caliber pistol. If my quarry eludes me for 3 whole days, he wins the game. If I find him, well, he loses.
Suppose he refuses to be hunted.
I turn him over to Ivan. Ivan once served as the official disciplinarian to the Great White Tsar. He has his own idea of sport. Invariably, they choose to hunt.
And if they win?
One almost did win. I eventually had to use the dogs.
Dogs.
The general steered Rainsford toward a window. The lights from the window sent a flickering illumination that made grotesque patterns on the courtyard below.
Rainsford could see about a dozen or so huge black shapes. As they turned towards him, their eyes glittered greenly.
A rather good lot, I think. They are let out at 7 every night. If anyone should try to get into my house, or out of it, something extremely regrettable would occur to him. Now I want to show you my new collection of heads. To the library?
I hope that you'll excuse me tonight, General Zaroff. I'm really not feeling well.
Well, I suppose that's only natural after your long swim. You'll need a good night's rest. Tomorrow you'll feel like a new man, I'll wager. Sorry you can't go with me tonight. Good night, Mr. Rainsford. I wish you good rest.
Rainsford hurried from the room.
The bed was good. The pajamas were soft as silk, and he was tired in every fiber of his being. But Rainsford could not quiet his brain. He lay, eyes wide open. The lights of the chateau were out. It was dark and silent, but for a fragment of sallow moon.
His room was high in the tower, and by the moon he could see the courtyard. Weaving in and out of the pattern of shadow were black, noiseless forms.
The hounds.
They looked up, expectantly, with their green eyes.
Rainsford finally achieved a doze. As morning came, he heard, far off in the jungle, the faint report of a pistol.
At luncheon, General Zaroff was solicitous about the state of Rainsford's health.
I'm worried, Mr. Rainsford. Last night I detected traces of my old complaint.
That is?
Ennui, boredom. The hunting was not good. Fellow lost his head and made a straight trail. Sailors, dull brains to begin with, and they do not know the woods, most annoying. Chablis, Mr. Rainsford?
General, I wish to leave the island at once.
But my dear fellow, you've had no hunting.
I wish to go today.
The dead black eyes of the general studied him. General Zaroff's face suddenly brightened. He filled Rainsford's glass with Chablis from a dusty bottle.
Tonight we will hunt, you and I.
No, General, I will not hunt.
As you wish, my friend. The choice rests entirely up to you. But my idea of sport may be more diverting than Ivan's.
The giant stood, scowling, thick arms crossed on his hogshead of chest.
You don't mean...
My dear fellow, I always mean what I say about hunting. This really is an inspiration. I drink to a foeman worthy of my steel at last.
The general raised his glass.
Rainsford stared at him.
Your brain against mine. Your woodcraft against mine. Your strength and stamina against mine.
And if I win?
I will cheerfully acknowledge my self-defeat if I do not find you by midnight of the third day. My sloop will place you on the mainland near a town. I give you my word as a gentleman and a sportsman. Of course, you must agree to say nothing of your visit here.
I will agree to nothing of the kind.
Well, why discuss that now? 3 days hence, we can discuss it over a bottle, perhaps. I suggest you wear moccasins. They leave a poor trail. And avoid the big swamp in the southeast corner. We call it Death Swamp. Quicksand. One foolish fellow tried it, and Lazarus followed him. Imagine my feelings, Mr. Rainsford. I loved Lazarus. Finest hound in my pack. Well, I must beg you to excuse me now. I always take a siesta after lunch. You want to start, no doubt. I shall follow at dusk. Night hunting is so much more exciting, don't you think? Au revoir, Mr. Rainsford.
General Zaroff's bow was deep and portly.
As he strolled from the room, Ivan carried in cocky hunting clothes, a long-bladed hunting knife.
Rainsford had fought his way through the bush for 2 hours.
Keep your nerve. Just keep your nerve.
His whole idea at first was distance between him and General Zaroff. To this end, he plunged along, spurred on something very like panic. Straight flight was futile. Inevitably, it would bring him face to face with the sea. He was trapped in a picture with a frame of water. His operations clearly must take place within that frame.
I'll give him a trail to follow.
He executed a series of intricate loops, doubled on his trail again and again, recalling all the lore of the fox hunt and all the dodges of the fox.
Night found him leg-weary, with hands and face lashed by branches on a thickly wooded ridge. His need for rest was imperative.
I've played the fox, now I must play the cat in the fable.
A big tree with a thick trunk and outspread branches was nearby, and, taking care not to leave the slightest mark, he climbed up and stretched out on one of the broad limbs. After a fashion, he rested.
Only the devil himself could follow that trail after dark.
But perhaps the general was a devil.
An apprehensive night crawled slowly by like a wounded snake, and sleep did not visit Rainsford. Toward morning, a dingy gray was varnishing the sky. The cry of some startled bird focused Rainsford's attention in that direction.
Something coming through the bush.
Advancing slowly, carefully, by the same winding way Rainsford had come, he flattened himself down on the limb and through a screen of leaves as thick as tapestry. He watched.
Zaroff.
The general's eyes were on the ground before him. He paused just beneath the tree, dropped to his knees, and studied the ground. Rainsford's impulse was to hurl himself down like a panther, but the general's right hand held a small automatic pistol.
Puzzled, Zaroff straightened up and lit one of his black cigarettes. The pungent incense-like smoke floated up to Rainsford's nostrils.
Rainsford held his breath.
The general's eyes left the ground to travel inch by inch up the tree.
Rainsford froze there, every muscle tensed for a spring.
But the sharp eyes of the hunter stopped before they reached the limb where Rainsford lay. A smile spread over Zaroff's brown face.
He blew a smoke ring into the air, turned his back on the tree, and walked carelessly away, back along the trail he had come.
Clearly, the general could follow a trail at night. He could follow an extremely difficult trail. He must have uncanny powers. The Cossack barely failed to see his quarry.
Why had the general smiled? Why had he turned back?
He is the cat. I am his mouse.
It was then that Rainsford knew the full meaning of terror.
I will not lose my nerve. I will not.
He slid from the tree and struck off into the woods, forcing the machinery of his mind to function.
300 yards from his hiding place, he stopped. A huge dead tree leaned precariously on a smaller living one.
Rainsford took his knife from its sheath and began to work.
When the job was finished, he threw himself behind a fallen log 100 yards away. The cat was coming again to play with its mouse.
With the sureness of a bloodhound came General Zaroff.
Nothing escaped those searching black eyes. No crushed blade of grass, no bent twig, no mark, no matter how faint, in the moss.
Zaroff was so intent that he came among the thing Rainsford had made before he saw it.
His foot touched the trigger of the protruding bough.
But the general sensed danger and leapt back with the agility of an ape.
The dead tree, delicately adjusted on the cut living one, crashed down and struck the general a glancing blow on his shoulder as it fell.
He staggered, but he did not fall, nor did he drop his revolver.
Rainsford, with fear gripping in his heart, heard the general's mocking laugh ring through the jungle.
Rainsford, if you are within the sound of my voice, I congratulate you. Not many men know how to make a melee man-catcher. You prove interesting, Mr. Rainsford. I'll have my slight wound dressed, but I shall be back.
When the general was gone, Rainsford took flight again.
A desperate, hopeless flight that carried him on for some hours.
Dusk came, then darkness, and still he pressed on.
The ground was softer under his moccasins.
The vegetation grew ranker, denser, insects bit him savagely.
Then his foot sank into the ooze.
The muck sucked viciously at his foot like a giant leech.
He knew where he was now.
Quicksand, death swamp.
He stepped back from the quicksand about a dozen feet or so, and, like some huge prehistoric beaver, began to dig.
The pit grew deeper above his shoulders, and he climbed out to cut stakes from hard saplings, sharpening them to a fine point.
He planted them with the points sticking up.
With flying fingers, he wove a carpet of rough weeds and branches to cover the mouth of the pit.
Wet with sweat and aching with tiredness, he crouched behind a stump.
His pursuer was coming.
He heard the padding sound of feet on the soft earth.
The perfume of the general's cigarette.
The general was coming, with unusual swiftness.
Rainsford lived a year in a minute.
He heard the sharp crackle of breaking branches as the cover of his pit gave way.
The sharp scream of pain as the pointed stakes found their mark.
He leaped up from his place of concealment with an impulse to cry aloud with joy. Then he cowered back.
3 feet from the pit, with an electric torch in his hand, stood Zaroff.
Well done, Rainsford. Your Burmese tiger pit has claimed one of my best dogs. Again you score. We'll see what you can do against my whole pack. Home for a rest now. Thank you for a most amusing evening.
Daybreak.
Rainsford, lying near the swamp, was awakened by a distant sound. Faint and wavering, but he knew it.
The baying of a pack of hounds.
Rainford could do one of two things. Stay where he was and wait. That would be suicide. Or he could flee, postponing the inevitable.
He stood there a moment, thinking. A wild chance came to him, and, tightening his belt, he headed away from the swamp.
The baying of the hounds drew even nearer.
On a ridge, not a quarter of a mile away, Rainsford could see the bush moving.
And the lean figure of General Zaroff.
Ahead of him, another figure, his wide shoulders surging through the jungle weeds.
The giant, Ivan, pulled by some unseen force.
He held the pack on a leash.
Any minute now.
His mind worked frantically.
He caught a young sapling, and, with a bit of wild grapevine, fastened his hunting knife, blade pointing down the trail.
Then he ran for his life.
The hounds hit the fresh scent.
The baying of the hounds stopped abruptly, and Rainsford's heart stopped too. They must have reached the knife.
He shinned up a tree to look back. The hope in Rainsford's brain died, as he saw in the shallow valley that General Zaroff was still on his feet.
But Ivan was not.
The knife, driven by the recoil of the tree, had not wholly failed.
Rainsford stumbled to his feet.
The pack took up the cry again.
Nerve, nerve, nerve!
He panted, dashing along.
A blue gap between the trees dead ahead.
The hounds!
Rainsford hurled himself toward the gap.
It was the shore of the sea.
Across the cove, the gloomy gray stone of the chateau. 20 feet below him, the sea rumbled and hissed.
Rainsford hesitated as he heard the hounds.
Then he leapt.
Far out into the sea.
When the general and his pack reached the place by the sea, the Cossack stopped.
For some minutes he stood there regarding the blue-green expanse of water.
Well then.
Then he sat down, took a bit of brandy from a silver flask,
Lit a cigarette.
And hummed a bit from Madame Butterfly.
General Zaroff enjoyed an exceedingly good dinner in his great hall that evening.
Better luck another time.
Yet, two slight annoyances kept him from perfect enjoyment.
1. It would be difficult to replace Ivan.
2. His quarry had escaped him.
To soothe himself, he read, in his library, the works of Marcus Aurelius.
At 10, he proceeded to his bedroom.
Deliciously tired, he locked himself in.
There was little moonlight.
Then he switched on his light.
Revealing a man who had been hiding in the curtains of the bed.
Rainsford, how in God's name did you get here?
Swam. I found it easier than walking through the jungle.
The general sucked in his breath.
I congratulate you. You have won the game.
Rainsford did not smile.
I'm still a beast at bay.
Get ready, General Zaroff.
Splendid. One of us for a pass for the hound. The other will sleep in this very excellent bed. On guard, Rainsford.
Sanger Rainsford decided that he had never slept in a better bed.